right. I guess first I want to say welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking your time and interest on a Friday afternoon and for the next few days coming up to participate in the AOPA Policy Forum. In my opinion, it is a unique opportunity to impact the field of orthotics and prosthetics on a very macro level versus the micro level that we have every day with patient interactions and things like that. So today is going to be an informal presentation with a lot of the information that will be presented in more detail during the April 20th sort of opening session. But we thought the amount of information is so large and we don't want anybody to be overwhelmed during the opening session. So we want to sort of provide you with a little bit of a primer to that information and give you a little bit of a step up so you won't feel overwhelmed. I'd like to also mention that there's still time to register and participate, register to participate. So if you have any classmates, any colleagues, any peers who you think might be interested after hearing the information presented today, please feel free to let them know. There's still time to register and participate. The meeting is also being recorded and it'll also be posted at the very least on the NCOPE website, but probably emailed out to all the registrants. So you can always refer back to it or provide it to people who were not able to make this session here today. So to start out, my name is Jonas Young. I'm a practicing clinician and residency director working in Washington, D.C. I'm also a member of the NCOPE Board of Directors, and this is my 6th policy forum, working with AOPA and NCOPE to sort of help coordinate the student participation. I'm going to sort of put Cheryl on the spot right now. I didn't tell her that she'd be introducing herself, but I'll have Cheryl introduce herself right now and then have Robin, Justin, and Terry sort of introduce themselves as they talk about their sections. So Cheryl, do you want to introduce yourself to the crowd?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Cheryl. I am also a practicing clinician, and I've been in the field for just under 10 years, based in the Maryland area, and I'm also a residency mentor. I sit on the board of NCOPE, and I think this is my 5th policy forum, and I've been helping out with the student programming for, I'd say informally the past 5 years, and then formally the past 2 or 3 years. So really excited to have all of you guys here, and we hope that you learned something today and you also learn a lot over the next few weeks.
So the agenda for this meeting, this primer, Cheryl and I will do a little bit of introduction. And then Robin Seabrook, who's the executive director of NCOPE, will talk to you a little bit about NCOPE's mission, give you a status on the academic and residency programs, as well as talk about the other organizations, or major organizations within O&P. And then our special guest stars, Justin and Terry, Justin Beeland being the AOPA Director of Government Affairs, will be giving you the AOPA briefing on the legislative and policy issues we're going to talk about this year. And then Terry, who is the AOPA Vice President and faculty at Concordia University, will be talking to you about what the virtual Hill Day meetings are going to consist of, what to expect, and sort of how to present yourself with confidence and professionalism in those meetings. And then at the end, everybody's welcome to sort of ask questions as we go along in the chat if you want, or you can save your questions to the end, and whoever might have the best answer to that question will hopefully be able to help you out. So Robin, would you mind going to the next slide? So a little bit of background into the AOPA Policies Forum for those of you who may not have participated before or are familiar with it. It's an annual event which historically has invited O&P professionals from around the country to come lobby and legislate the most pressing issues affecting the field at any given time. It's usually, like I said, it's an annual event, usually held in Washington, D.C. It's divided up into 2 days. The first day being an educational session where they go over those policy issues. Sometimes we've helped with the sort of legislative language, things like that. And then the second day is crazy. It's in-person congressional and Senate meetings where we're basically running back and forth on the Hill, meeting with different representatives for different senators and congresspeople. To me, it's super rewarding, and it's a unique platform for clinicians, patients, and other professionals in the field to be heard, which I think is very impactful and has a lot of basically sway with the Congress members or senator members and their staff versus just the constant legislator or lobbyers working on behalf of our field. This is a very in-person, very personal meeting for them. So I think it does have a lot of impacts. It is different this year. I think last year was the first time that AOPA has sort of tried the virtual format. This year they're expanding on it. So that first day, the educational session will be on April 20th. And that'll be sort of the biggest time commitment for people participating. And then I don't have the exact calendar in front of me, but over the next few weeks, it's divided into smaller sections for those Hill and Senate meetings. And most importantly, it's free. So we're sort of trying to use that as an opportunity to expand participation. Historically, NCOPE has sort of led the sponsorship of one student from each academic program in terms of registration, flying them out to DC, and having them participate in the event. But this year, because it is free and because we have a little bit more leeway in terms of people's schedules, it's less of a time commitment. We can invite basically every student and every resident to participate, and as a young professional, hopefully contribute to the field. So now I'll kick it over to Cheryl.
All right, so you may be wondering, why is participation important? And one of the things that you probably already know, and if not, you will learn as you start your careers, is that our field of orthotics and prosthetics is a really small field, just from the number of clinicians. But also when we look at some of the other lobbying bodies, we really want to make sure that we're advocating for ourselves, because these changes in legislation and regulation are going to have decades-long effects. And you'll learn a little bit about that, if not later today, but over the next few weeks, where there is some regulation and legislation that we're fighting against that has been in effect for quite a while because our voices weren't heard years ago. One of the other things you'll learn as you enter the field is that there are other health professionals who are trying to provide services that we're the experts in. We're the ones who are trained to provide orthotic and prosthetic services, but you're going to see there are going to be podiatrists, physical therapists. Here in Maryland, they tried to recently pass some legislation that was going to give pharmacy control of our field. So we're going to find that it's really important for us to have a voice. And it all comes back to our patients. We are here to advocate for our field as professionals, but also to make sure that we're protecting our patients. We're ensuring that what we're advocating for is going to help to improve patient care and the outcomes that we're going to face. One of the other things that's really important for us to participate is to provide a voice. Everyone here is fairly new to the field, and we hope to be involved in the field for a really long time. Our field in general does have a bit of an aging workforce, where a lot of individuals who've been practicing for 40, 50 years even are going to be retiring. And we want to make sure that we continue to have the resources to provide for patients all over the country, and power in numbers is really important. The other thing that we really want to make sure that individuals are aware of is that the level of education awareness, it has increased. Those of us, again, who are young and entering the field, I still consider myself fairly young, but we are more representative of field and of the patients. And we can provide a really unique perspective compared to someone who's been in the field for 30, 40 years. They have a unique perspective, but so do you guys, and so do we. So it's really important to make sure that we have our voices heard. And who better to talk to members of Congress about education than someone who's going through the process right now. So you guys know more than you think, and you really are experts, and we're lucky to have you here, and they're going to be lucky to learn from you too. Next slide, please, Robin. So you may be wondering, I'm really new to the field. What do I actually bring to the table? And you actually bring quite a lot to the table. One of the big things that is so interesting about our field is everyone seems to have their own story as to what got you interested in prosthetics and orthotics. And people want to hear stories. Stories make individuals care more. It adds that personal touch. So you have your story as to what interested you in the field, why you want to work with orthotic and prosthetic patients. And then in addition to your story, you're going to have patient stories. A lot of you have had the opportunity to work with patient models in school or through rotations that you've started as part of your program, either as a student or a resident. And those patients all have unique stories, and you have the opportunity to be their voice, especially for those who don't feel comfortable being a voice of themselves. You're also able to speak to some of the challenges of entering the profession due to limited school programs. As you know, and Robin will touch on this briefly, but it isn't a physical therapy program where there are multiple programs in every state. Some of us had to travel quite far in order to get our O&P education, and you're an expert on that. That's something that you can speak directly to these members about, and again, advocating for more school programs. You can also explain different clinical documentation requirements. So again, when we're providing devices, there are certain impositions that are placed on us in order to be able to provide those devices to patients. And that's something that you're learning about in school. And as you're more in your careers, you're going to learn more about that too. And then some of the bigger topics that I believe Justin's going to be touching on shortly speaks directly to the legislation. So learning and being able to discuss how what we do is different than durable medical equipment. And then also how we provide different types of devices to patients, including custom devices, custom fit devices, and off-the-shelf devices, and then being able to really speak to how those devices are different. And in school, these are all things that you're learning about, and you're going to learn about it more over the next few weeks. So even though you aren't necessarily in the field practicing yet, or if you are, you're very new to practicing, you bring quite a bit to the table, and we're really glad to have you guys here. Next slide.
All righty. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Hello, everyone. I'll turn on my video just briefly. I just don't want to risk unstable. Hello. My name is Robin Seabrook. As Cheryl had stated, I'm the Executive Director of NCOPE. I've been with the profession for 34 years, and I've been to many policy forums, and I find them very exciting, and I find this one to be very exciting and different. So I'm excited to see how the process is going to work, and I look forward to hearing from Justin and Terry from AOPA here shortly. But that being said, I wanted to touch briefly, and I thought I would lead off with identification of where you are in your professional journey within O&P. Sometimes I think this is taken for granted, but you know, currently most of you are students and or residents. So your interaction has been primarily with NCOPE. Once you start your residency and or you enter school first and then you start your residency. Once completion of that occurs, you're starting to move into your professional phase. So you're going to start interacting with ABC for your certification exams. And then once certified, you will hopefully participate with the important organizations of the Academy and AOPA throughout your careers. I do recognize that many of you students are currently Academy members at the student membership level, but one of the big differences is that you cannot vote. And so I hope that you will continue on because these organizations on behalf of your profession continue on and bring you into your professional phase throughout your entire O&P career journey. So I wanted to show what you see here on the screen are all of the O&P sister organizations. And yes, for a profession of our size, we certainly have quite a few organizations, all very important. But these are all the sponsored organizations that have supported for the past 6 years, student attendance to the policy forum in the past, which, as we've stated already, this occurred in the past or previously prior to the pandemic, where student representatives from each one of our 13 programs would come to Washington, D.C., and all of these organizations contributed and provided funding to support that, because it would include your airfare, your hotel, your food, etc. But it's important to be aware that all of these organizations believe there is of great value in participation in the policy forum and legislative activity for our students and residents. And therefore, I just wanted to identify and highlight and thank all of these organizations for their past support, and I know their future support based on the importance of the policy forum. And I just wanted to do a reminder of who NCOPE is. I know that because there are so many organizations and you are touching us on one front or maybe both at this point, but reminding you of what our mission is and our services are for the O&P profession, which is improving lives and strengthening the profession through education. And at the core basic, we set the standards for the academic programs through our KHEP system, as well as the residency standards. There's 4 levels of care that are underneath us in terms of educational standards and accreditation processes, which is the orthotist prosthetist that you're participating in, the assistant, the ped orthist, and technician. And then probably the primary major activity that we do as an organization is tracking our residents through their program and accrediting those residency sites. And finally, I just wanted to touch briefly upon some NCOPE stats that educational programs. We have 13 nationwide for orthotists and prosthetists throughout the US. We have 5 technician programs that are accredited and 3 ped orthic level programs that are accredited. On the residency program side, we're currently tracking 469 residents through the program. We have 344 residents set to complete in 2021, and we have currently 494 accredited sites. And just to give you a little bit of makeup of what the residency site compositions are, of the 494 sites, 1% of those are based in college universities, 8% are hospital-based or clinic-based, 3% are federally funded military care facilities or the VA, Department of Defense, and then 88% of the residency makeup is from our private practices throughout the country. So I'm going to end it right there for my brief NCOPE update and information, and I am going to throw it to Justin.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thank you very much for joining us. I am Justin Bieland. I'm the Director of Government Affairs at AOPA. I've been there for a couple of years now and gotten to know these issues, and want to echo some of the things that have already been said. One, I can't even begin to express my appreciation for the fact that you're here, that you're willing to be a part of this event, that you're willing to make your voice heard in Congress. If you allow me a little bit of a tangent, Terry Cuffle knows this story, but we just formed a board for our political action committee at AOPA. We have a PAC. It's pretty robust, but we haven't had a board. We just formed the board, and the joke we were making on our first Zoom with this group was, I think 2 or 3 of the people were former presidents of the board of AOPA. Other people had served on the board, and they just have, they moved off the board, and now they've circled back to the PAC board. It's a lot of the same faces talking about the same issues. So to have new leaders coming into the field is huge, and I can't thank you enough for your willingness to be a part of this. And I also want to echo something Cheryl said, which is how small our profession is, especially in terms of lobbying and the work we do on the Hill. I was amazed at how little members of Congress and their staff knew about this profession and some of the quirks that go into what we do, what O&P professionals do, what you're learning about. So that education is going to be absolutely huge. And I'm very thankful to all of you for taking the time to want to educate our lawmakers on all this. I'm going to give kind of a very condensed version of what you'll see on Tuesday as part of the policy forum. That's a 3-hour presentation that's really going to take a deep dive into some legislation that we're looking at and some of the things that you'll encounter on your legislative visits. But I did want to cover those just so you've got an extra leg up. I appreciate you giving me the time for what is essentially a dress rehearsal for this. And unlike previous years, we've gone to the Hill with a couple of different asks. There's bills that have addressed the workforce shortages that you've heard about. Last year, we talked about COVID a little bit. This year, we literally have one bill. It does 4 different things, so I don't want to minimize it and say it's simple, but there is just one bill this year. On the House side, it is HR 1990. The Medicare Orthotics and Prosthetics Patient-Centered Care Act. I say on the House side because the Senate has not yet introduced that bill. The Senate will introduce a version of this bill that's exactly the same, word for word, so we'll have it in both the House and the Senate. They just have not done that yet. And I'll talk a little bit about how we lobby that next week and a little bit later, because it does create a bit of an odd thing that you're fighting for a bill that doesn't exist yet. But the bill that we're mainly talking about writ large is the Medicare Orthotics and Prosthetics Patient-Centered Care Act. And Robin, if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide. It does 4 different things. It distinguishes O&P from DME. You've all learned this, I'm sure, and have questioned this just as I questioned this when I came on board with AOPA. Orthotics and orthotists and prosthetists statutorily, in other words, in the way CMS sees them and the way Congress sees them, are viewed as suppliers of durable medical equipment. They are loped in with other DME suppliers. It doesn't take into account the level of patient care, and I'll talk about this. You'll hear me talk about this a lot, I think, over the next couple of weeks. There's an element of patient care, an element of interaction that just to say that being a supplier of DME covers all of that is ridiculous. There's so much more that goes into it. So we need to get Congress to take this first step and separate and distinguish O&P from DME. We want a prohibition on drops. I'm actually going to go to 2C on this slide first, standardizing the definition of orthotics and prosthetics. Well, actually, you know what? We're gonna get to all 4 of these things in detail. So rather than me go through everything I'm going to say now, let's just go straight to this. So this is literally cut and pasted from the bill itself, HR 1990 on the House side, distinguishing O&P from DME. Again, statutorily, orthotists and prosthetists are viewed as equipment suppliers. They do not take into account the level of care that goes into that. So Robin, next slide, please. So we want to do 5 things with this provision. It sends this signal both to CMS and other federal entities that O&P is more than just supplying a device. Again, there's a massive level of patient care that goes into this. It's months, it's sometimes years, it's hours. It's more than just handing off a device. And you know, one of the things Cheryl mentioned at the outset was, you know, when these things started, our voice wasn't really heard in these discussions. We weren't vocal enough. There weren't really, frankly, enough people in the field to kind of counter this. And so given that the field is so small, they agreed, yeah, okay, we can be suppliers of durable medical equipment and we'll fix all this down the road. And now here we are all these years later, and you're talking about, you know, microprocessor knees and all of this amazing technology, and yet we're still just viewed as purveyors of a device, which is ridiculous. So this legislation passing wouldn't instantly create new billing codes. It wouldn't instantly have an effect within CMS. But it is the first domino that has to fall for us to be viewed as practitioners in the way that other practitioners are. If we don't pass this bill, that doesn't happen. And I don't say that lightly. CMS has told us we are not going to change the structure the way it is now. If you want to be removed from DME, Congress has to tell us to do it. So, you know, that's why we're fighting so hard for this legislation. And, you know, we've still got on this slide, it paves the way for potential telehealth billing. You actually won't see me say that next week. We had a long, as Terry knows, we had a long conversation about that this morning internally, because it's a little bit tangential, but without separating us from DME, you know, we're suppliers of equipment. We can't, whether our follow-up visits are in person or on the phone, orthotists and prosthetists can't bill for those. Over the last year, as part of this pandemic, many legislators have reached out to me, to our government relations team, and said, well, you guys must be very in favor of all of this extra stuff we're doing for telehealth. You know, we're giving all of this leeway on telehealth and really trying to boost that. And I've had to tell all of them it really doesn't matter to us. Are we doing more telehealth? Of course we are. We're doing infinitely more telehealth than we've done in the past. And we're really tailoring what it is we do to individual patients and providing a level of care that's unprecedented in this industry. But billing, it doesn't matter. We're still billing for that same device in the same way we always have. The follow-up appointments via telehealth don't get billed. So again, I want to emphasize, this doesn't instantly create a telehealth structure, but it's the first domino that has to fall before we can get there. And I anticipate, as does every medical specialty, that telehealth isn't going anywhere. More and more of the visits that we used to think had to be in person can be done by telehealth. So getting this provision passed would help get us there. Next slide, please. So you're going to see these today. You're going to see these next Tuesday. I'm not going to read them all off, but we're going to make sure that you guys know piece for piece what it is that we're asking Congress to do. You're also going to get these in a written format, likely Monday morning. So you'll have all of this information in one spot. When members of Congress ask, well, why do you want to do this? What would separating O&P from DME really do? You have all your answers right in front of you. So again, not going to read these, but these will be good for your visits next week. So next slide, please. Getting into the minutia of this a little bit, we're looking at two different sections. We're not going to go heavily into 2C. 2C literally just defines, it updates definitions of orthotics and prosthetics and orthotists and prosthetists. There's some outdated statutory language on that just needs to be updated. It's not controversial. It doesn't cost anything. It's just something we need to do. I actually don't even think you're going to hear us talk about this on Tuesday because it's a very, very small part of this bill. What is not a very small part of this bill is the definition of minimal self-adjustment and who gets to make that call. So next slide, please. Congress developed years ago a definition of minimal self-adjustment that said that a device, an orthoses, needed to be able to be put on by the person who's receiving it, an off-the-shelf device. Minimal self-adjustment literally means just that. The person who is accepting that that device, that orthotic, they're putting it on, they can do it themselves. There's not a lot of bending, trimming, molding, anything like that. They have to be able to don and doff that device themselves to be able to be considered minimal self-adjustment. CMS, in all of their infinite wisdom in 2007, added a definition of of minimal self-adjustment that said the orthosis has to be able to be put on by the patient or their caregiver or their supplier. Only in Washington, D.C., only in legislative speak do you have a definition of self-adjustment that literally means other people. It doesn't make any sense. And it was a massive overreach by CMS to say minimal self-adjustment should include these devices. As a result, the number of orthoses that get into that category is considerably higher than it should be. I have gone to Hill meetings with some of our members, and they'll literally have printouts of pictures of some of the devices that are considered off the shelf, that are considered minimal self-adjustment, and they are insanely complicated. There's no way that anyone could figure out how to use that device correctly without input from an orthotist, someone helping them to fit that device. So we need to get back to this congressional definition of off-the-shelf and minimal self-adjustment, which literally means you can do it by yourself. And the reason we need to do that is because of another statute that I'll talk about in a second. So if we can go to the next slide. This should probably be the summary talking points for lobbying. Again, you'll get these for every section of this bill. You'll get these in a written format next week so that you'll have them in front of you. But we're telling Congress, look, you came up with this definition, stick to that definition. Tell CMS that this other definition doesn't work. Codify it to make sure that this is the way it's going to be. One of the reasons, other than patient safety, that we need to go and make that definition of off-the-shelf whole again is because of a practice that had been picking up prior to the pandemic and has massively accelerated during the pandemic. And this is and I'm sure you guys have heard about this, the practice of people putting together cold calls, late night TV ads, lead generators, things like that, preying on Medicare beneficiaries and sending them braces that they do not need and don't know how to use. They'll get a list of beneficiaries. They'll cold call one of those people and they'll say, does your back hurt? If your back hurt, your back hurts, your arm probably hurts. We'll send you a device. We'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. We're going to bill Medicare for it. You won't ever see a bill. No problem at all. I'm going to put you on the phone to someone who's going to write you a prescription over the phone, and then we're going to take care of this. The person, maybe they get a box in the mail, maybe they don't, but either way, Medicare gets billed for that device that this person probably didn't need and certainly doesn't know how to use. And that's exacerbated by the fact because that CMS has that definition of off the shelf that isn't off the shelf. So not only are they getting devices they don't need, but because of the complexity that can be part of those devices, they definitely don't know how to use them. So next slide, please. So this bill would put a prohibition onto what we call drop shipping, the ability of those late night lead generators targeting Medicare beneficiaries to send those devices. What it does not do is hamper in any way the actual ability to send a real off-the-shelf device. If there's something that doesn't require molding, trimming, any of that, we'll all be able to still send that. PTs and OTs will be able to supply equipment as well. It just really is designed to to eliminate the practice of folks sending those devices and preying on Medicare beneficiaries who don't need them. So, sorry, next slide. And actually, we can go to the next slide after this one. And I'll just add that there was you'll hear more about this next week, but there was a Department of Justice investigation into this in 2019 that yielded $1.2 billion with a B dollars in Medicare fraud as a result of this. That was a great deterrent to the next person, but nobody did anything to actually curb the practice. The folks that were doing it are still doing it. They found ways around it. As I said, it's been exacerbated during the pandemic because more people are at home. More people are easily preyed on during this. There's been a number of OIG reports that have come out over the last year talking about this. They haven't made additional arrests, but saying this is an ongoing concern. So this would address that. We don't want Medicare beneficiaries getting braces that they don't need, don't know how to use. So next slide, please. And this one is, we've tried over the years. This bill has existed in one way, shape, or form for I think 12 years now. This will be the second Congress where we've really made additions to it to make it more patient-centric. So eliminating that the drop shipping, that would obviously be help our patients and help us as a profession to curb the practice of folks getting braces they don't need. Another way we wanted to make this patient-centric and really help the patient is to ensure that they don't need to go to two different places to get their prosthesis and their orthosis. As of now, and you probably know this, an amputee will go to, they'll get their care done and then they'll go see their prosthetist. In all likelihood, they're going to need some sort of orthotic on their sound side to balance things out, whether it's a knee brace or whatever it is. Right now, if that prosthetist doesn't have a competitive, the ability to have a competitive bidding agreement, then they cannot give that device. So then the person has to go to another person who does have a competitive bidding contract to get that orthoses. It makes it extraordinarily complicated, especially when this person is probably having mobility impairment issues early as they are navigating their amputation. And of course, in COVID, we want people going to as few places out of the house as we want. So this was a big argument we made last year. This is a very simple statutory fix that would ensure that that prosthetist office does not have to have a competitive agreement in place to be able to provide an orthotic, just to make sure that that patient doesn't have to go to too many places. So next slide, please. Kind of repeating everything I just said, we want to make sure that this is a provision that's very similar to something that physicians have, OTs, PTs. They've got these agreements in place. to provide those sorts of devices, we want to have the same thing. We're not asking for any special privilege, any special carve out. We really just want to have a level playing field, and more importantly, make it as easy as we can on our patients. And I think we can all agree that's a good thing. So yeah, and we can skip over this one as well. So real quick, now that you know a very 50,000-foot view of this legislation, and again, you'll hear a lot more about it next week when you get your talking points and when we talk about this at the kickoff meeting for the policy forum, I did want to go into how this bill is actually going to become law. This is a very, very, there's a lot going on in this bill, as you can imagine, that members of Congress and their staff just won't understand because they don't understand our profession. So it takes a real lot of, it's going to take a lot of advocacy work on AOPA's part, but also among our grassroots advocates. It's really going to, we're going to have to lay a lot of groundwork. Normally, and Terry knows this, I would do How a Bill Becomes a Law, and I would do the Schoolhouse Rock thing, and we'd all get to dance around and laugh to Schoolhouse Rock. I'm not going to show that this year. I feel like you've all seen Schoolhouse Rock before. And what I always did was I would show Schoolhouse Rock and How a Bill Becomes a Law, and I'd be like, that's great. That's how you learned it in high school civics. It absolutely does not work like that. It hasn't worked like that in decades. But on paper, in theory, this is how a bill becomes a law. Again, there's a lot of wiggle room in terms of how this thing gets done. But at its core, it's somewhat accurate. A representative introduces a bill, it goes to a subcommittee, a House or a Senate subcommittee. They mark it up, then it goes to a full committee so they can take a look at it. Then it goes to the floor of the House or Senate, they pass it. If the House and the Senate have passed different bills, they have to reconcile their differences. It goes to the president for signature. In a perfect world, that'll happen that way with our bill, but who knows? But in order for that to happen, next slide, please. It's not that simple because there is a lot of new rules, and there's new rules every single Congress. Literally, there's a rules committee that at the beginning of every Congress says, this is what we're going to do for this Congress to make sure everything is fair, that we're passing laws in an effective way, that we're not making it look untoward with certain legislation being passed over others. And one of the things that is being done in this Congress that's sort of been, it's been good practice in previous Congresses, but it's sort of been codified this year, which is a bill needs a certain number of co-sponsors. In other words, people who are supporting the bill to even be brought up before a subcommittee. So you saw on the previous slide that the bill's got to be introduced, which it has been by 4 different members of Congress. Then it's got to go to subcommittee. The subcommittee chairs aren't allowed to bring up bills unless they've got a minimum number of co-sponsors. The number that I've heard, and this is somewhat anecdotal, is 120. By way of comparison, this bill in the last Congress had 11 co-sponsors. So we've got our work really cut out for us to get a lot of people on board with this bill. That's where all of you come in. That's where our advocates come in. We really need to gin up members of Congress to get on board and support this bill. There is some wiggle room there. Our committee of jurisdiction is the Energy and Commerce Committee on the House side. There's a subcommittee, the Health Subcommittee of the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee. We actually have something of a leg up there because the ranking member, the ranking Republican on that subcommittee is one of the sponsors of our bill and a huge supporter of this bill. Hey, there we go. Look at me. So on the House side, you see Brett Guthrie. Brett Guthrie is one of the sponsors of our bill. He's always been passionate about this issue, and now he happens to be the ranking Republican on the Committee of Jurisdiction. So great news for us. Even if we don't get to that 120, if we've got a number of Republican members of that subcommittee on board, great. That should help. But the more folks we can get on this bill, the higher that co-sponsor number can get, the better. Almost the same situation, weirdly enough, on the Senate side. Senator Steve Daines of Montana is now the ranking Republican on the Senate Finance Committee. The Senate Finance Health Subcommittee, which has jurisdiction over our bill. He is the lead Republican on the Senate bill. So we're well positioned in those committees, but again, because of rules, and this is more on the House side and less on the Senate side, but because of those rules, they aren't going to be able to bring up that bill, even though they really want to, unless there's a certain number of co-sponsors on it. And this is sort of you don't need to read the whole thing, but this is what I was talking about, where there's new rules as there is every Congress. And one of those rules, it's a little bit, they don't exactly phrase it that way, but one of those rules is without a certain number of co-sponsors, you can't bring that bill up. So again, why we're relying on all of you to help carry this bill and help get co-sponsors on this bill is because of this rule. We are not going to be able to move it without a certain number of co-sponsors. Next slide. Perfect. So that's a great place to end, because now that I've told you what we need to do, Terry is the absolute perfect person to tell you how to do it and how to navigate your Hill visits and how to advocate, because she has been doing it in an exemplary fashion for more than a decade now for us. So I will turn it over to Terry.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Robin and Cheryl and Jonas, for having me. I'm especially grateful to be here to speak with you all about this policy forum, the AOPA policy forum. It's actually your visit, and these are your issues. And I will share why I'm especially grateful. One of my fondest memories of the 11 years that I have been going to the policy forum is the first year that the students came. My husband, Charles Cuffle, was the chair of NCOPE at the time, and Robin had asked us if we would answer a few student questions directly following our big gathering. And it turned into an hour conversation of just students in a round table discussion. We pulled chairs together, and it was incredible. And so I'm grateful to each and every one of you for being here, for taking the time, for showing that you are committed to serving in this profession for your patients beyond the exam room. So thank you for being here. You can make a difference. It is widely known and recognized that in-person visits from constituents are the most influential way to communicate with a member of Congress who is undecided on an issue. These meetings provide a chance for you to build relationships, to establish credibility, for all of us to establish credibility, and enable access and ultimately influence decisions that are made in Washington, D.C. Next. So today and this week, what should you expect? Today, and this is basically going to be the presentation that is my part of next Tuesday. So you'll see a lot of this content again. And we're going to talk about on that day on Tuesday, that's the educational piece, where we educate ourselves on the important issues that we will take to our legislators. Justin did a fantastic job of summarizing them. Next Tuesday, he and some other industry leaders will go into more specifics. So you have more of an arsenal, you have more of a deeper understanding in case a question is asked. So we prepare ourselves, our minds and our hearts this week to do good for others. And we would like to help you do that so you can do that. You can feel confident doing that. Next, Robin. So when you take a visit on the Hill, how do you make it effective? Virtually, in person, when you're visiting legislators at home in your own state or in DC, I always like to talk about 3 specific words to remember that can just roll off the tip of your tongue. And then we're going to talk about 10 steps to follow, and I'll just fly through them. Next. So what are the 3 words? Educate, advocate, and access. If you can remember those 3 words, if you're nervous, we call it an elevator speech. If we were actually in Washington, D.C., which has happened several times, you walk into an elevator, you're going to meet a congressperson, and lo and behold, he and a legislative assistant walk into the elevator with you and join you. So you've kind of got an opportunity there to say something. So these are the 3 words. Next slide, please. So educate. We are all here to educate our legislators and their staff about the orthotic and prosthetic issues that are most important to us, to all of us, not just our patients, family, friends, all of us. Next. Advocate. We are all here to advocate for and sometimes with those who have limb loss and or limb impairment. Again, many of them are patients or our friends and even family members. Next. Access. We are all here to educate and advocate with purpose. We come with a mission. We are purposeful, and this purpose is to provide access for our patients, access to orthotic and prosthetic care and devices. Next. So the 10 steps to the effective visit, your effective visit. I will go through each one of these on the next slide, so I won't read them now. Go ahead. So 1, be prepared. It's kind of obvious. You want to dress for success, whether you're in your home state or in Washington, D.C., or even if you're in the virtual world. Be conscientious of how you look. Make sure you have your link or your phone number ready to make the call to start the process. Be prompt, and I would suggest that you try 5 to 10 minutes earlier. And then call and email the day before to confirm with the office or of the legislator, just to make sure that you've got the right time and the right time zone. And they're expecting your call or your Zoom. Next. So some virtual reminders. This is new for us this year. Normally we're in person, but Justin and I have talked about this, and we think it's pretty darn important to make sure we all realize that it's a little bit different when we're not in person. So make sure you're choosing the room you're in wisely. Make sure there aren't distractions around you, bright lights or loud sounds or busy backgrounds. Choose a desktop or a laptop over a cell phone if it's possible, and make sure you're keeping your camera stationary either way. Test your technology in advance. Test the link, the audio, the video. Raise your webcam to your eye level to look into the camera at all times, especially when you are speaking. Turn off any sounds or notifications on your device or any devices that may be around you. And then avoid multitasking. It's just not professional, nor is it polite. Next. So do your homework. Next Tuesday, those 3 hours that we spend together will be you doing a lot of homework. So don't fret. There is a lot of information, but as Justin said, there's only one bill. There's one bill, and there's 4 sections of the bill. And you don't have to know every detail of every section. You just have to know enough to speak on a topic that you're comfortable with. So educate yourself, attend the meetings, which we will do this week, talk with others, ask questions when you have them. Review the materials that have come across. There are all kinds of organizations that help us with these materials. You actually end up being the expert in the room. You spend a few hours really diving deep into this, and it's really amazing how you end up knowing more than the legislator. I mean, if you think about it, if they don't have a device, if they don't know anyone who has worn an orthotic or prosthetic device, then they may not know much about it. So be confident in your approach and your appearance, and don't make things up. There's so many people that you can relay information to or questions to. Just honestly say, I'm going to pass that on, but I will get that question answered for you. And it's really hard for us in our field to not use O&P acronyms. So I would just caution and ask you, think about that. Think about not using them because third parties, the lay world, they don't even know what a CPO is. Okay, next slide. So select your spokespersons. So normally when I have visited DC, I always have a practitioner with me and a patient with me, usually an amputee. And I'm going to shout out to Nick Nelson right now. Nick, if you want to wave your hand, are you there? Because Nick is someone who has been on a trip to DC with me. We also have Gino and Ryan from Arise, so thank you. Thank you to all 3 of you for being here today. So think about who is in your group that can speak to each issue. Decide ahead of time who will take each issue. We have 4 particular content-based issues here. One might be more appropriate for a practitioner to speak to. One may be more appropriate for a patient or an amputee to speak to. Okay, next slide. So be brief. Be brief, stay focused. Make sure you have an outline with you and stick to it. It's always great to start with an icebreaker, some type of hometown small talk. When we walked into Representative Paulson's office years ago, there was a canoe hanging from the ceiling. It was super fun to talk about the canoe. He also had an Schwann's ice cream cooler in his front lobby where anybody could have an ice cream cone. So great icebreaker if you talk about something like that. Know the specifics about your legislator. Is he or she a Republican or a Democrat? Know whether this person is on a committee that is of interest or of importance to AOPA. And know if your legislator has an interest in healthcare or has voted on healthcare issues recently. Use the bill numbers, know the authors. Next. Personalize your issues. Tell a few of your stories. If you are a patient, tell about what your story is. If you're an amputee, potentially whatever you're comfortable with, from what happened to you or how you work in the field or how you live and how potentially something has there has been a barrier created that has affected your access to care. So talk about that if you have that. Any challenge of providing access to O&P care. Next. Be positive and react honestly. Fairly intuitive. And I know you all know this, so just focus on these things, the positive aspects of the O&P world. Our patients have remarkable stories and they need our help. That's why we're here. Don't be afraid to address some of the negatives, but try to sandwich them in between the positives. Always be honest with your delivery. Be prepared to say, I don't know, but I'll find that information out for you. And don't forget, your legislator needs your vote. He or she actually is working for your interests. Next. Be friendly with your legislative staff. It is amazing. Each year that I have walked in Senator Klobuchar's office, for example, Amy Klobuchar, there's a different legislative assistant every single year that we go back. And then for Eric Paulson's office, there were sometimes the same people year after year. And it was awesome to be able to establish a relationship with staff, to find out who they are, where they went to school, if they had kids, or if they were an intern. And so just have that small talk to establish relationships. The legislative staff are incredibly important to us and really provide the access to the legislator that we really need. Next slide. So close the deal. Remember the ask. Ask, ask, ask. What does that mean? Ask them to author or co-sponsor be it on our bill. Ask them to vote with us on the bill. If there's a letter writing opportunity, ask them to write or sign on to a letter. Ask them for support of any O&P related issue that comes across their desk. Ask them to call you if something comes, if they hear the words orthotic and prosthetic, make them think of you and ask them to connect with you. Ask them to come visit you at your school or at your facility if you work at one, and then ask them to take a photo, even if it's virtual. Next. Make sure you leave behind materials. This year, normally we have a file folder filled, but this year that will be by email. Next. Remember to say thank you. Common courtesies go an incredibly long way. Again, fairly intuitive, but remember not only to say thank you, to be genuine, and then to write a thank you after your visit is finished. Next. Justin. Gonna head it back to Justin.
I was going to say I have no questions, but thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Terry.
This would be the time that any of you can ask us questions for Justin and I particularly, or on broader scope, including Robin and Cheryl and Jonas. So feel free to write a question in the chat box or unmute yourself.
I have a question regarding the sign-up deadline. What what is the last date people can sign up for to participate in this?
To co-sponsor the bill or to be part of the policy forum? Sorry.
Be part of the policy forum.
Oh, the sooner the better, because we want to make sure we're squaring you away with visits. It starts on Tuesday, so I would say Mondays probably we'll still have registration open.
So feel free to tell your friends.
Yes, please.
Working
love
on
to
it.
have-
I'd like to also mention for the students and residents participating, if for some reason there are no other representatives from your state or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to AOPA or Cheryl Nathanson or Cheryl Sachs or myself. And we're happy to jump in on the virtual calls to provide you some support if you feel uncomfortable being in there alone.
And I've got a fairly hectic schedule over the next couple of weeks, but happy to join you for as well on any of your meetings if you want some additional support.
I'll just say for everyone, we obviously, again, it's virtual this year, but we do hope that in future years we are going to be back in person. And if you have not been to DC, if you've not seen them all on the Hill, it's really quite an experience. It's really, really wonderful. So we hope that this is the first of many policy forums that you'll be joining us for.
Yes, the in-person ones will be much, much more fun. I'm not going to lie.
That's true. Are there any other questions that we could answer? We are going to be sharing this presentation. It has been recorded. So certainly if you are a student, and I'll share it with those that attended today, pass it on to any of your fellow students. If you're a resident with any other residents that you might know, we are going to post it to our website as well and share it. And, just because this call ends, sometimes questions hit you afterwards, feel free to email me or anybody else on this call in terms of Jonas, Cheryl, Terry, or Justin, and we will get an answer for you. But the biggest, I guess, take-home message would be we want you to enjoy it. You have a purpose in participation, in some ways even greater than those that have been in the field for a very long time. One of the things, and you'll probably learn this on Tuesday as well, a lot of the staff members are your age. They're extremely young and bright, and so although it can seem intimidating, some of these visits, sorry, I probably should have taken off my video, can seem intimidating when you really see the people who wield the power in DC are the staffers to some degree. Isn't that correct, Terry and Justin?
Absolutely, to the point where the members of Congress will say that to you. Like you'll be meeting with a member of Congress and they'll say you need to talk to this person because they're the people who make this hell happen.
Yeah, that's why it's so important, as I mentioned, to make a connection with them because it will be extremely helpful for you.
Jonas, did you want to, if there's no other questions, I think we can give people back the rest of their afternoon. Jonas, did you have any follow-up or rounding up?
No, I just wanted to say thank you from all of us. I know everybody's thanked individually, but as a group, we're really passionate about student resident participation in events such as these. So we're really happy you're taking the time to invest in the field's future. So thank you so much, and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, and stay well.
Everyone.